My father was a mechanical engineer in his time, which is something that sort of definitely, command of science and math and physics. That's important to be a cinematographer. My mother was, an amateur painter. So I, unbeknownst to me, I had this sort of proper background of science, math, and art. I bought this 8mm camera and for a couple of months shot films of my buddies skateboarding, just shooting a lot of what I thought were cool shots. Well, I put that away after a few months, and then I went to college at the University of Texas. And my grades were not all that good because of lack of interest. And really sort of figured out at the end of my first year that if I didn't get my shit together, I'd wind up in Vietnam. So I was sitting there at the end of the school year with a friend of mine in his apartment, flipping through the course book for next year, which was about the thickness of a small phone book, because there were 32,000 students at that time at the University of Texas. And going, no, 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 looking at this, looking at that. And the very last thing in there was the Department of Radio, Television, and Film. So I said to my friend Ted, I said, Ted, I think that there's a Department of Radio, Television, and Film, and I think this is a film school. And he goes, what's a film school? And I go, what can they teach you in film school? I'm going, I don't know, but I'm going. I mean, I've got to do something, so I'm going to film school. Well, I go into film school on day one, and it's fall of '68, and there's 20 of us in the class, and the teacher goes, look, there's very little chance of ever getting into this industry. This is a closed industry. It's really father to son. Outsiders do not get in. It's controlled by the unions. And if you're lucky, you'll get grants. You'll make films on the weekends and in the summers. Well, half the class got up and walked out at that point. I guess they wouldn't figure they couldn't sell that to their parents. I stuck it out. By the time I got my master's degree, I felt like, well, I'm pretty good at this. I think I'll break this, and I predicted to my friends, pretty bold statement, that I will shoot feature film by the time I'm 35. And I will break into this industry and I will shoot feature films by the time I'm 35. Well, about 3 weeks after that, phone rings. It's Tobe Hooper. Tobe Hooper, I'm doing a film here. I've been checking out all the cinematographers in the state of Texas, and he goes, I reckon you're the best, and I want to send you a screenplay. I hung up the phone. I was like electrified. People at my house go, what's going on? I go, I'm 12 years ahead of schedule. I've been offered a movie.
Oil storage units continue to burn out of control at the huge Texaco refinery near the Texas-Louisiana border. 3 storage units exploded into flames during the night, killing at least 3 workers and injuring...
I'm going to be honest with you and the world, or the viewers of this. The lighting of that movie, all right, I knew a bit about lighting, and there's some points in it where I'm doing some very interesting stuff. There's a scene with Ed Neal in front of the pickup truck and backlit, and that was my idea. It looks like it's headlights, but I actually have 2 1,000-watt lights rigged where the headlights are. I knew a bit about light, and I sort of got hipper because all of a sudden now I'm shooting every day, and I'm getting dailies, and I'm really my learning curve is going right up the top. I'm seeing film every day. But in a lot of ways, some of the lighting of that, some of the funky quality of it, has to do with inexperience and technical restraints. I just didn't have big lights. For one, they didn't exist. I certainly didn't. And there were some that did exist, but I didn't have access to them on that movie. It was a rather low-budget film. Originally started out to make that picture for $80,000. It was hot and no, I couldn't help the heat because I had to drive a lot of light in there, so it was even hotter. I mean, it was, it may have been 105 outside. It was probably 115, 120 inside by the time I added the lights to it to get it up to exposure. But for me, when I'm shooting a film, no matter what I'm shooting, the conditions fall right to the background. You know, I mean, it's all about what you're doing at the time. You're so focused on what you're doing that, you know, I wouldn't really sit there and go, oh, I'm hot, whine about it. I mean, I'm, doing what I love.
Hello? Hello?
Well, we finished that whole sequence outside there. And okay, we're moving on, we're going inside now. I go, Toby, we had this dolly platform that was quite low, and I had 60 feet of track. And I said, Toby, if I were to lay down and hang the camera over the edge of this dolly, and with our 185 letterbox, I could keep the track out of the shot. I can be behind the swing as Terry stands up, and I can actually travel under the swing with her. And I said, and the house will grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, and eventually the house will overtake the frame. And at the same time, I'll be walking behind Terry, who's got these short cutoffs, and Toby gets this look like, oh man, how'd you come up with that? I mean, he's like, that is great. We start to lay the track. They go, what are you guys doing? Well, we're going to make this shot. No, you're not. You're not making this shot. The shot is not on the shot list. You're only approved to make the shot list. You're moving on. Toby goes, look, he goes, you guys may fire us, but for right now, I'm the director, he's the DP, and you cannot stop us. We are making this shot.
Kirk?
The film was very strong on paper. The script was really strong. So we knew this could be something strong. Of course, you never want to predict that it's going to be what, how could you? You'd be considered egomaniacal if you did say, oh, this is going to be great, it's going to the Museum of Modern Art, and 33 years later, people are still going to care about it, and, be remade and all that. But still, at the same time, it was so strong on paper that I thought it would be something, quite good.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. After you stop screaming, you'll start talking about it.
So, 1973, I shoot the original. In 1986, I have a daughter. And now, by sort of mid-90s, early 90s, I'm thinking, well, that's not, that kind of film's really not that cool now. Now that I'm a dad, I'm a more responsible person. And I've had a good career at that point, doing music videos and starting to get a pretty good name in commercials. So I'm on a lot of panels, cinematography panels. And then people are saying, well, let's talk about Texas Chainsaw. Yeah, I'll talk about it, but I have to tell you that if that picture were offered to me today, I would not take it because, now I have this child in the world now, and now it's not all a big joke. Now it's a serious matter, to me. So I doubt I'd even take that film. Well, I had started to shoot with Marcus Nispel commercials. He was aware of my music video work. He had been a music video director, and had started to get a career going in commercials. And we started to work together. One day, I'm shooting a music video in Montreal, and my cell phone rings, and I answer, and it's Marcus. He goes, Daniel, he goes, I've just signed to do a remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Will you shoot it for me? And I say yes immediately, and then yes, but I'm working right now. Let me call you later. Well, then I start thinking, oh my God, I've been telling everybody for a couple of years now that I wouldn't do a film of this type if anybody offered me this screenplay. Now, several days pass. I finish my job in Montreal. I come back. I'm talking to Marcus about it. And he goes, Daniel. He goes, look, I want you to shoot this film. He goes, there's multiple reasons. One, you are my cinematographer. You shoot my stuff anyhow. On that level, it's just a huge coincidence that you photographed the original. Two, he goes, I know from you telling me the stories over the year how important this thing is to your whole life, your whole career. Everything springs out of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, I was on my way to becoming a college professor. Not a Hollywood cinematographer, member of the ASC. I thought I'd be a teacher. feel great about having done both of them. They actually didn't feel that different to me. I mean, I was back in Texas the same damn months. I was back there in freaking hot as hell July and August again. Although one was an $80,000 picture and the other was like $5 million below the line. It didn't feel a lot different to me, really. They're both tough, difficult, because all films are, because, you know, in the end, nobody wants to give you more money than you absolutely need. Nobody wants to give you more time than you absolutely need. And as a cinematographer, you're sort of the guy who sees to it that you get that done and on time and on schedule and with the resources you've been given. And of course, you never want to give up the quality. You always want to make absolutely the best film you can. I would absolutely not be the same person I am today if I had not worked on the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And there is no way that I would have had the opportunities, and I've explained it to you in a long version of it, but there's no way that I would have had the opportunities to have the great career and the fantastic life that I've been afforded, at filmmaking. I'm very proud to have made it. And even though it's not, I'm not that evil of a guy. I mean, yeah, I do shave my head because my hair fell out, but I don't have any tattoos, I don't have any earrings, I'm not pierced, so I'm not that weird of a person. I actually don't even that often go to those kind of films, but evidently, I think history will show that I'm good at making those kind of films.
I started out as a teenager, really. I'd seen a movie, it literally drug me through the halls of insanity when I first saw it. A friend who saw the film at the time became physically ill. What an impression for us. So many years later, my wife and I moved from San Antonio to Austin. I had heard the film had been made here in Austin. Where was the house? It was urban legend. Was it real or not? Bunch of false leads. Finally got a map from a friend of mine, Michelle, at work, and she had a friend who was taking some other friends out to the house to party, and sure enough I found it, but it must have been about 2 or 3 days after they had moved the house. I mean, I go out there, I didn't get to see it. The ground was still fresh from where the foundation was, but I got a few pictures and I put it on my website, small website. I got emails from around the world wanting more. They wanted to know where the house was, what happened to the gas station, the graveyard, and where's the cast now, and it just really snowballed from there since 1998. Well, here we are in a late 1800s house built from a kit in Round Rock, Texas. Obviously, this is the most important area of the house where his victims came in. Kirk was killed up here. Pam followed him in. Leatherface had his steel door just beyond here, which was put in for the movie. It wasn't an original part of the house. The house was actually made from a kit out of a Sears Roebuck catalog back in the late 1800s. The parts were actually pre-cut and drawn by horse and wagon from downtown Austin to Round Rock, where the house sat for about 100 years. It was built there. There's actually a couple of houses similar to it that were out there as well. They're gone. It changed owners over that period of time. It sat on Quick Hill, which is in Round Rock. People rented the house, and it was during that part of the 70s about where a family was renting the house. They allowed Tobe Hooper and company to come in. They moved to the right side of the house during filming. Well, here we are upstairs. This is where Sally first tries to get away from Leatherface. Sally is is trying to find help. She's trying to find somebody to help her in this death house. And the first thing she does when she runs upstairs is she finds Grandpa in this bedroom.
Please.
Now, obviously some changes have been made to this house. This room is a bit smaller than it used to be. This is to accommodate large parties that can dine in the main area. But this was Grandpa and Grandma's room where she found both corpses. After a while, the house just really took a turn for the worse. There were some vandals who did some serious damage to it. And it wasn't until the Antlers here who came out to purchase the house. They moved it in several pieces out here to Kingsland, Texas, where it's now a gorgeous home restaurant business. It was moved into several pieces by crane, then hopped on trucks out here. It was quite a long trip. But we're all really glad to see that it's being kept up, that it's at its majesty that it is now. Well, in this room, this is probably the most infamous room of the whole house. The final scene, the dinner scene, happened here. We had a huge homemade table resting in the middle here. Of course, we had Grandpa on one side, we had Sally on this side. All the windows were covered up in blankets and coats because it was supposed to be nighttime and they didn't want any sunlight to come in. But yet, it was middle of summer, it was 100 and something outside. In here you had lamps that were in the ceiling, no ventilation whatsoever. About here is where they had the bucket with the sledgehammer where they're actually trying to bludgeon Sally for dinner.
Come on.
Since the house was moved here to Kingsland, the first business to open here was the Kingsland Old Town Grill. It was then that I started bringing cast members out here, such as Alan Danziger, who played Jerry from the film. Of course, Gunnar Hansen, who had not seen the house since he actually played his character for the film. I also brought up Paul Partain, Ed Neal. Then the Kingsland Old Town Grill moved out, and then we got the Four Bears restaurant that came and stayed here for a while. Wonderful food. They put on banquets. They also put on screenings out here once in a while. They'll bring a big film screen out here. Bunch of people come out with their ice chest and have a good old time out here. And there was even some cast members out here for the last screening of Chainsaw. Marilyn Burns, Gunnar Hansen, all of them came out and had a really wonderful time. Well, this is the bone room. We were first shown this room and Hannah was trying to find her boyfriend, Kurt. She goes through a curtain that was here. She kicks a vase over and stumbles into a bunch of feathers, and she is introduced to how crazy this house is. We have chickens that are in cages hanging from the ceiling. We have bones hanging from the ceiling. Just pure horrific mayhem in here. And of course, she screams and runs out. But this is also the scene where Sally gets away from the family during the dinner scene. She's shown crashing through this window over here, back into daylight, back into reality. The first owners, which was the Kingsland Old Town Grill, they really weren't, they'd be honest, they could really care less about it. They were more interested, understandably, in running a restaurant, which they did their best in doing. The second business that came into Four Bears restaurant, bit younger crowd, understood and used that marketability somewhat towards tourism. It definitely brings some business out here. Well, here's the kitchen. It looks a lot different than it used to for the film. Naturally, they've had to redo this kitchen for commercial purposes to have a real working kitchen here to serve gourmet food. It was right about here where the famous meat hook scene happened with Pam. Bob Burns had rigged up his railroad ties and also a real meat hook to hang Pam from here. Where this window is, there's a doorway here that you could have line of sight to the actual dinner scene, which is next door here. Well, as far as locations, I have to say, of course, the house is probably the most fun. Whenever I come out here, it's usually because of a cast appearance. Because I get such a huge response from people around the world with the common interest of Chainsaw, I went on and started up the official Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan club. And we have tons of memberships from around the world, really. We send out newsletters. People can purchase autographs and other types of merchandise. It's once again, it's a meeting for people who perhaps can't make the journey to Kingsland, to Texas, and see the sights. The fan club kind of brings us all together. And there's always fans out here who have been going to my website, and you know, we get to meet, we get to talk shop, we get to talk chainsaw, get to shake hands, and really the fans of the movie are just so wonderful. You would think that horror fans, they'd be gothic and weird and whatnot, but I definitely get to meet a lot of neat people from around the world. That's what I like the most. Saw's family.
Dude, you're it. You can go now. I got this one. You want to not do that? We just washed it.
Ya don't act, ya react.
I'm coming, Effie. I'm coming. Hey, I know what I'll do. Ow, that hurts.
He did all this.
Hutto.
Big time American director movie guy.
Home of the Hutto Hippos. You're welcome. Nobody can charge ladies. I do my talking finished.
Cold water, Mary Sunshine. Cold water.
These actors are such whiners. Thank you. Would you believe the stuff your lady's hawking me? No, it's not.
How to use your IBM copier 125. First, turn it on.
Cast this guy. Well, the deal with being schizophrenic is you don't get to choose. You know, you just like kind of hang out and go, hey, let's see who's gonna show up today. Sometimes it's rednecks, you know, from hell, and sometimes it's, you know, English gentlemen, and sometimes it's people from somewhere else, man. You know, so you never know. You just kind of hang out and wait. You know, I was always the kid that was in class going, hi, Mrs. Feldman, you know, and I was making voices, and it's really kind of funny because now, dubbing lots of Japanese anime and voiceovers for commercials and stuff like that, whenever I get a big contract, I call my second grade teacher. And it's great fun. Hello, Mrs. Feldman. Hi, it's Eddie. I got another $30,000 job. Stop calling here. How'd you get this number? I've changed it 9 times. You know. but I was just always talking stupid. When I found out people would pay you to talk stupid and you didn't have to be in politics, I said, I'll take that deal, please.
I think we just picked up Dracula.
Where you headed, man?
South, you work at that place?
Oh, no.
How did you get stuck way out here?
I had an acting class, and you know, I'd forgotten to learn the lines. Well, actually, I hadn't actually forgotten. I was salsa dancing with the Larondo twins at a local nightclub, and had stayed out far too late and still learning my lines. So I'm sloshing back to acting class, and one of my little lady friends runs out of the drama department at the University of Texas and says, are you gonna try out for the movie? And I went, the movie? What movie? They're casting a movie. I said, oh, hell yeah. Let's go try out for the movie. So we ran in there, and here's Toby Hooper, and Toby walks over, and he goes, come here. And I go, hi. And he goes, are you mocking me? And I went, no, why? And he goes, can you be weird? And I said, whoa, weird is what I do. I patterned the character that I did for him after my nephew, who is a diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic. I'm just schizophrenic, but they haven't diagnosed me yet because I don't go to the doctor. You got to keep moving, you know. But he had actually gone to the doctor and gotten diagnosed. My nephew has walked this fine line for years and has never really whacked anybody, but we were always waiting for the call, you know. Because he does all that stuff, you know, that I do. And he scares the devil out of people. But he's not harmful to anyone at all. He's never harmed anybody. But we're always waiting for that call. He finally lost it, killed 32 people at a rest stop in Laredo. You know, I mean, oh, well, come get him. The difference between when you're on an A set, like, you know, I shot a JFK with Oliver Stone. You got a handler with a clipboard and a walkie-talkie. There's 360 walkie-talkies on set. They take you from the set, they walk you to the room that you're in. They put you in the room and you sit and you wait. You don't get to talk. They don't want people wandering around. You have to sit and be quiet. You know, low-budget movie making, everybody's everywhere. You got people leaning over the rail, you know, that work at the bread place next door going, I think you ought to put him in that chair there. You know, I mean, that's low-budget movie making.
It's a nice picture. You can pay me now. Huh? $2. It's a good picture.
No, man. Frankly, give him back to him.
It didn't take too long to shoot the stuff in the van, but we had to shoot, again, low-budget movie making. Have you ever worked with gunpowder before? Absolutely. Okay. You'd know then how much to put on top of a Polaroid picture to not make it unsafe to... Oh, absolutely. Right. The first thing you say in show business is they say, well, Ed, can you roller skate? You go, can I roller skate? Of course. You go out that night and learn so you can get the part. So somebody obviously said, absolutely, I've worked with gunpowder. But what they did was, the scene where I'm in the van, where I'm supposed to put the gunpowder on top of the Polaroid and blow it up if the person doesn't pay me my $2 for it, because I have to do away with it. Their spirit must be low. They put too much gunpowder, and it almost blew us all up. So we had to shoot that again a couple times. You can hear Toby in this cloud of smoke going, I think we're gonna have to use a little less gunpowder. Acting pretty much is reacting to what is presented to you, you know. And so all you need is something to play off of. Luckily, I had fun people to play off like Gunnar and Paul Partain and Marilyn and Terry McMinn and people like that who could give you something back, at least, you know, because sometimes there's nothing worse than, take it, and they go, what? You know, I'll take it. You know, no, but this was a good happenstance. But it was really great to come out with a group of kids like that you could actually work with. So coming up with the character was easy, just bouncing off of what was coming at me.
Oh, I'm about half ready to call a cop.
That's the last goddamn hitchhiker I ever...
Jimmy Seau was the best. He had the best sense of humor. I mean, you know, that sequence where he's poking Marilyn is just, that's all Jim. He's made all that up. But he was just the best. And there's one sequence where he's the only one I know that could have got away with this without me killing him. The sequence where he's hitting me with the wooden dowel outside the truck. They had, you know, low-budget movie making. They turned to the prop girl, and Toby says, well, give me something for Jim to use head with. Got any of that balsa wood left? And she goes, balsa wood? Oh, yeah, balsa wood, balsa wood. She goes over and she picks up an oak dowel that they were using to support the camera with, and she hands him the oak dowel. So instead of the balsa wood, in the movie, in the scene, he's beating me with this. And I'm screaming and carrying on and flailing about in the dust. Dust is flying, rocks are going, and you can hear them off camera. I can hear them out of the corner. Wow, Ed's really doing good tonight, isn't he? It's going swell. And poor Jim had not a clue. And I was, of course, black and blue. And I didn't tell him until much later. Oh, I'm sorry, Ed. I wouldn't have done that. I'm so sorry.
I thought you was in a hurry.
I have worked on, you know, $60 million films, and I've worked on $24 films. That set was the most fun to play on. Robert Burns just would get up in the morning and drive around the hills country with a box looking for stuff. He'd find dead armadillos, and he'd find dead chickens, And he'd find cow bones, and he'd find bones he didn't even know what they were. Hopefully they were animal. He would cut pillows open and dump the feather pillows all over the floor. And then he would just sprinkle bones all over the floor. So when you walk, there was crackling and sound and feel. It was all textural. And I know for a fact, as an actor, that a third of my performance came from that set. It pulled it right out of me.
We were just having fun. You think this is a party?
The most difficult was certainly the dinner sequence because it was so long. We shot forever. We shot for like a couple of days or something. It was like insane. It was like, oh. But that was I moved troops in Vietnam easier than that scene. I'm telling you, through triple canopy jungle was easier than that scene.
You like this, Dave?
Well, again, low budget movie making. You had a piece of sausage, a real piece of sausage. In A movies, you don't use real sausage. You use fake sausage because whoever would have been the prop master would have understood. You know how much lights you have to film with, just horrendous lights. It doesn't look like it when you see the movie, but there's horrendous lights everywhere. That sausage started decomposing on that plate. If you look closely and watch the film closely, you can see fumes coming up, literally. Now, the plates of sausage are right underneath our noses. And we're all like leaning, like, quit leaning. Stop leaning. Get back in frame. We're all like, dude, put your nose over here, man. And you couldn't move it because we'd already shot a bunch of scenes and you couldn't move it for continuity, because it's right there, right in frame of the camera. You couldn't move it. What are you going to do? The best time on the set was hammering Marilyn in the head. That was because we couldn't keep from laughing because we were using a paper mache hammer, which sounds like this when you hit your flesh. That's the sound. So they dubbed the sound in, but on the set, and you're doing these horrible lines about I'm going to kill you and you're going to be bloody and you're boop. It's silly. So it's real hard to keep concentration. And we were doing stupid stuff like made bleed. And they would go, cut that out. Oh, sorry. Was I out of character again? Way out. It's a very effective shot, but it's very simple movie making. You put your chest up against the truck and you back the truck up, and then you do your motions in reverse. And then they just reverse the film. And that way they can run the truck right, and it looks so friggin' real. You go, oh my God, how'd you do that? And then the guy that gets one over is a dummy on wires across the, that's easy to do. But it's amazing how effective a simple shot like that can be. I went to a theater in Austin, Texas, where it was being a first run, and we went and sat near the back. And some Yahoo friends from college and I couldn't resist. About 2/3 of the way through the movie, there were these 3 sorority girls in front of me who had been watching the whole thing. And I tapped one of them on the shoulder and I said, you like this movie? And they turned around and screamed so loud, and they all ran out of the theater, of course. And somebody came over and said, what's going on? And I said, I had no idea. These women were just screaming at this. I think it's the film. It absolutely amazes me. It just won't go away. It shows somewhere in America almost every week. I don't think there was anybody on the planet that wasn't surprised, because we had thought at one time that, like Boone and I were talking about, well, this is probably going to show at 3 drive-ins in Poughkeepsie, 1 in Sioux Falls, and I think there's another one in Winnemucca. Winnemucca will book this because they don't get much product there. In fact, at one point, just before the film came out, we were seriously trying to find Toby to ask them to take our name off the credits, because we thought, oh my God, what if this horrible thing comes out and we're associated with it, it'll kill any stage career that we have. Cut to 2 weeks later. Hi, Toby. Hey, it's Ed. Just want to check the spelling. Got the spelling right? Okay, good. It's a totally different story after on. It's a blockbuster movie. It's making millions, and it was filmed for $1.80. You know. The funnest experience is the public. I mean, you keep meeting people over and over and over, and you hear wonderful phrases like, "Whoa, Margaret and I," you know, because they're now like, you know, this is 30-something years later. We first met in high school, and we went to the drive-in theater, back when the drive-in theaters were still open. So we went to a drive-in theater to see your movie, and it was the only movie we ever watched. You know, and I mean, if you know American society and you understand what that means, that's powerful. And then you have the kids, see? And that's the most wonderful thing about it, why I mentioned that the neatest thing about it is the public, because every single year, there's a whole new audience for the film. And that's one of the reasons why it won't go away, because there's a whole new audience for the film every year.
It's the film that won't die.
If I have any more fun today, I don't think I'm going to be able to take it. You damn fool! You ruined the door!
Somebody said, what's the best thing? And what the best thing is how you get to meet people and stay friends with them for 30 years.
That's right.
My dad was a Baptist preacher, and obviously I didn't go that way. But we grew up in little towns. I grew up in Hereford, Texas, in the Panhandle, and then we moved to Portales, New Mexico, which at that time had a population of 13,000. And I remember my mother asked me one time when I was in junior high school if I'd ever thought about what I wanted to be, and I said, yeah, I want to be a doctor. And I guess that's all I'd ever thought about. And so this is what I set out to be. And from that point on, everything I did through high school and all and college was headed toward that. But I've always done artistic things, drawings and sculpture and wood carving and all that all my life. And when the movie came around, Marilyn was a friend, and she just mentioned to me one day that she was doing this movie, and they needed somebody to do special effects makeup. And I said, well, I can do that. I don't know if I could do it or not, except I figured, I've been interested in this sort of thing. And so I bought some books on the subject and just started playing around with it. I made a lot of masks using dental alginate, and it's set up so rapidly that sometimes in order to get enough to cover a face, I'd have to have 2 or 3 people mixing up so we could get it on there before it's set up. And then I would cover it with strips of plaster, and I used plaster like you'd use for a cast. Well, the stuff deteriorated pretty rapidly, so you had to do something with it. And Bob Burns made all the masks. The ones that we were going to use for that purpose, I gave to him, and then he did whatever he did for the mask. I actually had somebody make one of my face. I figured if I was going to put everybody through this, I would know what it felt like, because you had to have big pieces of straws in your nose with cotton packed around them and all that. So I guess one of the masks was probably made from my face. And I did when I finally created all this stuff, which took a while. I think I made him up 3 times, and it took 7.5 hours each time to apply the makeup. John was very nice. He didn't really have much to say. He was there, and I don't think he even knew exactly what he was supposed to look like afterwards, except I think he was, I don't know, 18, 19 years old, and they told me they wanted him to look over 100 years old. So we made the mask of his face, and then in order to have something to work on, rather than casting it in something else, I cast it in dental acrylic, which is the same thing that dentures are made of. And then using this, before I painted it, I made another one, and I simply sculpted all the wrinkles on the face. Since I'm a plastic surgeon and do just the opposite in getting rid of wrinkles, this was, I knew where they belonged at least. I first started off putting a wrap around his head to cover his hair, and then a ball cap on, and then applied the pieces of liquid latex to fill out the face. I made molds of his hands, and the hands, of course, get more wrinkled and the veins usually get larger, and so we made that also.
I've been thinking about letting Grandpa have some fun. You always said he's the best.
He's the best, all right.
Just let him have a whack.
I was on the set as much as I could. There were times when I stayed out there for 18 to 20 hours. But I guess I was there most of the time that he was actually made up and shooting, yeah, because if he needed a patch up, I needed to be there.
Hit her! Hit that bitch!
I got offers. I could have done some more makeup after the movie was over, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, but movie making and plastic surgery practice doesn't quite go together. I was happy with it. In fact, I had an exhibit, and that's what these pictures were for. I had an exhibit down in Miami at a National Plastic Surgery meeting of these pictures with a little thing about the movie. And the Wall Street Journal came down there and did a little squib, even a plastic surgeon does the reverse, from what he normally does. And it went over well at the meeting. So yeah, I've got good memories about it.
by and large, the show started as primarily an over 30 crowd. We do specialize in like late 50s, 60s, and 70s films and guests. And then over the years, we've kind of adapted to include a few more mainstream stars, which have brought in some younger crowd. So it's a nice varied crowd, but it really is a horror movie crowd. And here we are, 9 shows later. We started in September of 2000, and here we are April of 2006 on our 9th show. Well, in doing what we do on trying to capitalize on, classic 70s films, Chainsaw was inevitable. It was just when to put it on. And lo and behold, at our first spring show in 2004, it just coincided with a 30-year anniversary. So we did it as a 30-year anniversary show.
We're sitting here in our own humble, low-budget way trying to celebrate 30 years of CHA with Mr. Ed Neal. Mr. Alan Danziger, Leatherface Gunnar Hansen, Harold Burns, Mr. Paul Partain, Mr. Luke Berriman, and Mr. Robert H. Burns.
The atmosphere at our 30th anniversary show was fantastic. Everybody was upbeat. Paul Partain, who was sick, was in a great mood. Robert Burns, who didn't know he was sick, was in a good mood. Everybody just had a great time. The cast, the fans, myself included. I thought it was a fantastic weekend all around. You know what? I think when it comes to Chainsaw, I think every fan sees way more than they're shown on the film, and the images stick with them. You can't find too many horror fans, especially over the age of 30, where Texas Chainsaw won't be in their top 10 horror film list.
I think one of the first things I'd ever heard about Texas Chainsaw Massacre was an article in the paper. I was living in East Lansing, and there's an article about a football team that had gone to see it the night before a ball game, and they lost the ball game because they were too sick for watching the movie. And so it took a while to just come up with the courage to see this thing, because I was just ready to be traumatized, and I pretty much was.
My wife and I, Amy Lynn Best, we run Happy Cloud Pictures. And we've been doing the convention circuit for such a long time that we decided to go crazy and do one of our own. And that was a nightmare. But it was rewarding. Everyone seemed to have a good time. And fortunately, they made all their money at all the shows at the rest of the year, so they didn't have to rely on us for their income. I've known Gunnar and Ed for years because of this convention circuit. I don't think I could have had my first show without them. They've always been good to us. They've always taken the time for us, and it meant so much to Amy and I to have them there. It's really something special. And they signed this banner that we had made for our first show. And anytime I'm feeling like really frustrated with the industry or anything, I go out in my hallway where this banner is, and there's Gunnar's name and Ed's and everyone else who was at the show to support us, and it gets me through the rest of the day.
You know, to be honest with you, there was an old tagline from the third movie, "The Saw is family." And a Cinema Wasteland show, half the people through the door are regulars, have been here every show. The Wasteland is family. I think they just went hand in hand with each other. The fans are rabid about the film, and my regulars are rabid about this show. They just went hand in hand. I mean, like I say, the Saw and the Wasteland are both family to well over 1,000 people, who attend this show every 6 months.
I'm in the auto industry. I've been in service and parts for years. The convention is an idea that's been brewing in my head for a few years now, and I guess probably around May or June I decided to go ahead and do it, and my wife really encouraged me to do it, so that was a big factor in making that decision. But We've just been working for about 7 months on it, and it's finally worked out. We were told by so many people that it couldn't happen and it wouldn't happen in Texas, and we made it happen and it worked. You know, I mean, there's so much horror steeped in Texas or based from Texas. With the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films, you know, Tobe Hooper. Now we've got, you know, Robert Rodriguez working out of Austin. So there's so much stuff, and it goes even further back than that. So Texas has always had a stake in the horror industry. I think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a huge influence. I mean, you can see it's evident in the Rob Zombie films. So it's been a huge influence.
I was in Austin, Texas. It was fall, so that would make it September, October, because I went to a football game. And afterwards we went to a party, and the movie, people would play the movie over and over and over. There was music and there was the movie. And I didn't see the whole thing because it was pretty freaky.
And the first time I saw it, of course, it scared me. It scared us on the set. I mean, I think my most specific memory is the first killing that we did. It's when Bill Vale, what was his name? Kirk or something. He goes in and he stumbles on that little ramp, and Leatherface jumps out and hammers him a couple times, and he trembles and shakes, and then he slammed that door. And we all just held it in until they said cut, you know, and screamed, and I ran out the door. I think everybody else ran out the door too.
I don't remember when I saw the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think I remember more about afterwards because I had heard so much about the blood and the gore, but then when I watched it, everything happened behind closed doors. But I always repeat this to people. It seems like they attribute more to that movie than what they actually saw. They swear they saw grisly chainsaws ripping through people, but it wasn't there. It was done so well that they leave thinking they saw that, but it was all done subliminally behind closed doors. So that was the remarkable thing about it for me.
Chainsaw Massacre always lived with me for a long time, and I always liked the movie, liked Tobe Hooper and everything. And that movie was actually film processed at a laboratory in Dallas that processed my movie when I shot my movie. We're well known, Texas is well known for that Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it's inspired a lot of different movies from a lot of young independent filmmakers, and that's what's good about it, you know. It's given some people some ideas and some shots at doing their first horror pictures and stuff, and, you know, Tobe Hooper showed people what he did when he was young, you know, coming right out the door, you know. So it's a very inspiring movie in a lot of different ways.
Texas Chainsaw can be placed right up there with The Exorcist and the classic films of the Universal days. It scared the crap out of me.
Any closing words on this whole weekend?
I'm tired. I'm ready to go home and take a break, and I think I'll take a horror break also. I'm horrored out right now. Even though I love it so much, I'm done with horror for at least a week or so.
Let's see which way this works. It wants to be this way, doesn't it? Does that look all right?
The whole room's gonna get smoky.
And they'll think this is a Ridley Scott film.
Yeah. Okay, so just look where you
Pretend you're over there.
Yeah, pretend there.
Bob, you've just disappeared into that chair. Okay, I'm gonna talk like this. No, I'm not. All right. I'll stop being a jerk. I'll be talking about like this because for some reason my frog is throating up. And you never want a throaty frog, believe me. I don't know what it means, but I don't like it.
I don't like it.
All right. Well, I was born in Iceland, and then when I was 5, my family moved to America. And I went back in the summers, but grew up here in America. Actually grew up in Maine. Well, I lived in Maine until I was about 11, and then we moved to Texas. So I should say I grew up in Texas, went to high school and college in Texas, but always wanted to come back here. I was studying literature. I studied literature, English as an undergraduate, and then in college, in graduate school, I was a Scandinavian studies major. So my intention was to go off and write books. And that, even when he did Chainsaw, that was my plan, because what I really was expecting to do was do this movie as a kind of experiment. I mean, it was something new for me. I'd been involved with a couple of small films in college. I'd been in a couple of plays, but I'd never really been in a movie. And I just thought, here's a chance for me to do something new. It's like another weird job. I mean, another job unlike anything I'd done. So I took this on as just a chance to do something new and interesting and learn a little bit about how films are made. I was probably the only person in the cast and in the crew who had no intentions of being an actor or no intentions of working in the film industry. So I took it on as an interesting summer job. My hope for the film was that if everything went really well, it would be the kind of movie that 5 years down the road, there would be some hardcore horror fans who remembered it. Maybe it would do well enough financially that the investors would be paid off, so everybody would be happy. It would be like, let's say, 2000 Maniacs, where nobody in general, I mean, you had to be a fan of horror films to know it, and then you liked it. You know, it was a good horror film, but that was it. And to me, that was my biggest hope for this film, that it would be good enough and successful enough that everybody would be happy with it and a few people would remember the film 5 years down the road. I really had no expectation that it would be more. But very soon after the film was released, I took a friend out to the location, and we were standing on the road, on the Quick Hill Road, where we had filmed. On one side was the Leatherface family house, and on the other side of the road was the Franklin house. And this car full of teenage boys pulls up, and they walk down to the fence. They're standing next to us, and one of them looks over at us and says, "You know, that's where they made that movie." And as soon as he said that, I knew that this movie had some traction. You know, this movie was going to do something. When teenagers are coming to look at the place that they made the movie, and they just call it that movie, then I knew that it was going to do something. That's the one car in town, by the way.
That's it.
Every Sunday night, about this hour, he comes by. So what do I do now?
Well, just
act natural.
Yeah, act natural. Okay, maybe not that natural.
Well, my real passion was always writing. It's always what I wanted to do. So I, always had that intention of just being a writer, whatever that meant. Writing books, writing magazine articles. And that's why when Chainsaw came out, I just left Texas. I was living in Texas at the time. I was out of graduate school when we did Chainsaw, but then I went back for one more year of graduate school, and at that point moved to Maine because now I was ready. I was interested in working as a writer, so I came up here because I loved being in Maine and because I felt I could live less expensively here. I really liked the fact that it was a small town and it had that small community sense where you know everybody and you say hi to everybody in the street. But also I like the climate, I like being on the ocean, and I like the fact that there's a real winter here and it gets cold and quiet and dark and beautiful long, summers with long days. And a little village where no one ever is on Main Street in the winter. See? The first winter here I wrote a really bad novel, but at least I wrote something, And in fact, I was so committed to that about a year after I moved here, Bob Burns, who was the art director on Chainsaw, Bob called me and said, "I'm in LA, I'm making movies. I'm with this new guy, nobody's heard of him, Wes Craven. And he's doing a movie called The Hills Have Eyes. There's a part for you as one of the killers. Can you be here in 2 weeks?" And I said, "No, I'm not doing movies anymore. I'm a writer. whatever that meant. And so, very stupidly, I turned it down. And my reasoning on it was, there were a couple of things. One is, I'd met a few film producers, and I wasn't very impressed with the film business. My feeling was that so many of the people I met were just really slimeballs, and I didn't want anything to do with them. But another thing was, I had made this decision, which was, I would do anything to write. And if it meant riding on the garbage truck to pay the bills, okay. And I did that. If it meant being a waiter or a bartender, you know, whatever it took for me to do, I mean, I shouldn't say it that way, but I mean, I was willing to do whatever I needed to do to be able to have the chance to write.
I haven't eaten in a week. I haven't eaten in a week. They don't feed you in this little village.
So pretty quickly after I moved here, I was writing. And within a year of moving here, I was making my living writing. And that's pretty much the way it went. I mean, writing was really what I was doing. In 1987, I get a call from Fred Olen Ray. And Fred says, hey, remember me? We had met actually when I was on this film, Demon Lover, in Michigan. And so Fred said, you know, I'm in LA making movies. Why don't you come out? And I started to say no. And then I thought, well, this is really silly. Why am I saying no? He's, you know, it's a trip to LA. So I actually said yes. And I flew out to LA and, you know, did my participation in Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. And after I had done the film with Fred, I started getting asked to do other films. But the other thing that came along was I was asked to write a film script. So I wrote a script for a small budget horror film. And I loved doing it. It was like writing a novel again. You know, it was like going back to fiction, which is what I'd always wanted to do. So at that point, I started really pushing also to write screenplays. And that's primarily what I've done. I haven't had a single one produced. I've had 2 optioned. I've sold 2, you know. I've actually spent quite a bit of time the last few years writing and producing documentary films. So I just recently finished a documentary film. The client was the Passamaquoddy tribe of eastern Maine, and it's about their relationship to the St. Croix River watershed. So I have continued to be able to write scripts for documentaries and you know, produce them. Well, you know, having moved to Maine, I really did not understand what a big movie Chainsaw had been. I mean, I understood in the sense that the film was very controversial. There was a front page story in the Philadelphia Inquirer about how people were throwing up in the theater and leaving, demanding their money back. I knew that Rex Reed had said this was the most scariest movie he'd ever seen. So I knew that it was having an effect and that people paid attention to it, but I had no idea that Chainsaw had become part of the culture. So I was very surprised to discover how intense this was for people. The one event that really probably was the single thing that made me understand was I was watching an episode of Cheers, and Kirstie Alley is in the show, and she's been invited to spend the weekend house sitting in a state out in the country. So at the end, you know, the last act, she's out there and it's starting to get dark and she gets scared. And so she runs around the house, locking the doors, closing windows and locking them because she's now afraid. And she sits down in the living room. This is right at the end of the show. She sits down in the living room and she hears a noise and she says, "Oh, Leatherface, I hope that's not you." And that's when the light went off. I thought, wait a minute, this film must be huge to people. I mean, this must be part of the culture. If Kirstie Alley on a mainstream TV show can make a reference to Leatherface without no explanation, that means that people know who Leatherface is. And it was really the late 80s before I understood how much Chainsaw Massacre had become a part of the culture. And I'm glad I didn't know that because I was busy doing what I wanted to be doing. And I wasn't participating in the film scene. I wasn't trying to take advantage of any of that. I just wanted to write. And by having moved to, you know, an island in Maine, it allowed me to do that without really being affected by what happened with the movie. But I still didn't imagine that it would become, you know, what it became. That's the other car. That's the police. That's the cop running after.